Hello, and welcome to week 4 of History 231. We have quite a bit to cover this week, but I'm going to try to make it actually a little bit shorter than last week, just because I can see each week making these videos a little bit longer, because that's kind of what I want to do, because I want to actually spend more time with you, not on the video, actually in person, but I'm going to try to make these around 10 minutes and cut it off right around there. So anyway, here we go. We're going to talk this week about the revolution. We're going to talk about some other things that are not abominable at all, and you know what I mean. We're also going to talk a little bit about common sense, which is our reading this week. And so we'll set that reading up. We'll talk about the midterm, set that reading up, talk about the midterm, talk a little bit about the revolution. So let's start there. Let's start with a very simple question this week. It's a sort of radical question, but let's think about this. And here it magically is going to appear before you. What would it take for you to take up arms and revolt violently against your own country? Think about that. What would that take? Raising taxes, some injustice. What exactly would it take for you to take up arms against your own country? We tend to think about these American colonists as sort of sitting around waiting to become patriots and waiting to break away from England, and that's mostly incorrect. Mostly they had to be convinced that they needed to take up arms, that they needed to become patriots, and it was no small undertaking. It took 15 years or so to really convince enough people in the colonies to become revolutionaries. They're not sitting around waiting for revolution or waiting for the moment they can be free. They sense themselves as British colonists more than anything else, as British peoples. And so this is not a small undertaking. So when you think about that this week, think about all of the events that have to sort of lead up to that war. The road to the war starts with that French and Indian War that you read about last week. So you read about the French and Indian War. At the end of that war, that the British government started to need to raise some funds to pay for that war. So they started passing some taxes, and they're well-known taxes to us now, things like the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act. And the British colonists, so those here in the Americas, had strong reactions against all of those acts. Every time the colonists started to revolt, the Crown responded poorly. The Crown doesn't know how to respond to that. And in fact, many times the Crown would repeal acts, almost encouraging the colonists to revolt more. So the Crown passes an act, the colonists revolt, the Crown repeals the act. Well, what are you going to do if you're a colonist and they pass another tax? You're going to revolt again. So we kind of catch common sense in the middle of a long story of revolt. Common sense, and then following that, 6 months later, the Declaration of Independence. Those come in a moment when the colonists had already had years of revolting experiences, years of sort of thinking about British policy and British responses to them, and they have all that time to sort of set up for this revolt, and that's where we catch them at the beginning of Common Sense. There's some events that we should talk about before we get to Common Sense. One of those I think is it's a well-known one, but it is the Boston Massacre. So in 1770, with an influx of British soldiers into Boston, there is a problem in the streets of Boston. There's a fight that turns into a little riot. Now this riot happens at night. It, more than anything else, is a misunderstanding. The colonists had been pushing in against these British soldiers. They'd been throwing rocks and snowballs at them. One of the British soldiers, who is feeling basically very threatened, one of them fires into the crowd, unfortunately, and the other soldiers then start to fire. And what ensues then is the Boston Massacre. Now, the important thing for us is by this point, by 1770, they're already taking events that we would see as just a normal tragedy, and they're turning them into political events. They are politicizing these interactions and this tension with the British. We can see that most clearly in, let me press the button, press, and here's the next slide. The Paul Revere piece of art on the Boston Massacre. If you haven't seen this before, just go to Google and type in Boston Massacre and hit images. This is probably what will come up. If it doesn't, type in Paul Revere Boston Massacre. I'm going to try to hold it so without shaking it for 5 seconds so you can actually look at it. If you see this it doesn't look anything like an accident. It doesn't look anything like an awful unpleasantness. It looks like the British are standing there being ordered to fire into a defenseless crowd. And even the dog here is very clearly, here's a dog, very clearly on the side of the colonists, right? And so he is this loyal animal. All of nature then sort of yells out in favor of the colonists. And that's what Paul Revere was selling, not only selling in terms of making money with, but selling as an idea. He's really politicizing the cause of independence, and others would do the same thing. So we have things like that Boston Massacre, other things like the Townsend duties and the burning of the Gaspee, other things that you will read about, and it all really leads up to the publication of this fabulous and fabulously important but difficult book, Common Sense. On the blog this week, if you didn't buy Common Sense, I gave you a link to the whole thing online. But if we think about this is the most important piece of literature that would inspire the colonists to write the Declaration of Independence. So this is so important because it takes all these ideas of John Locke and it pares them all down, puts them in language that the colonists can understand, and the colonists absolutely take it and run. They love the ideas in Common Sense. Thomas Paine was a strange character. You can read about him on your own if you want. Had quite a perilous adventure of a life, but this little pamphlet that he wrote has an enormous impact. And basically, the Declaration is not written without Common Sense being written first. So there's a direct causal relationship between this and the rest of the Revolution. Just to give you one little section of Common Sense to think about. And listen to the writing also, because Paine's quite a good writer, but it is still in that 18th century mode, so I apologize for that. But his whole argument in Common Sense is you have to break away from England. It's inevitable that the colonies will be free for economic reasons, for religious reasons, and then, as you see here, even for natural reasons. So listen. Small islands not capable of protecting themselves are the proper objects for kingdoms to take under their care. So basically what he says is, England's an island. It should belong to someone else. America, that's a continent. Well, I mean, North America is a continent. So what he's saying here is it's absurd in supposing a continent to be perpetually governed by an island. In no instance hath nature made the satellite larger than its primary planet. So basically, England is like a little satellite, and the Americas are like a big planet. And so the moon does not control the Earth. It's the Earth and its gravitational pull that controls the moon, right? Maybe. So basically, Thomas Paine's ideas are extremely important for us, and they will be very familiar to you by the end of the week. So get ready for that. Then one of the things that Paine also says is he calls the King of England a royal brute. He says the King of England is a royal brute, and he never should have had a crown placed on his head. So our word of the week, the one you're going to incorporate secretly, again, I loved that this week. Didn't you like having to use the word abominable? So secretly this week on your blog entries, you're going to write royal brute somewhere. Just write it all caps. When you're describing the king, when you're responding to a classmate, I think this is it's a funny and fun thing to add to the blog. So we're going to do that for now. So for this week, enjoy the blog. We have Common Sense as our reading. We have some reading about the American Revolution also. And then the other thing to talk about is the midterm. So we're going to start to talk about the midterm. This is the very brief version of the midterm talk. Do you know why? Because you're going to get an email. In that email, you'll see the format of the midterm. And basically, what that format will say is there are two parts to the midterm. Both of them are written, but you're going to be able to use the whole wealth of all we've learned this quarter, of both books, Ben Franklin and Common Sense. You're going to be able to use it all together to construct your responses on this midterm. So and we're not doing that this week. I'm just telling you to watch for the email because it'll be coming through later today. So, or if you're watching this on Sunday, it'll be coming to you on Sunday. So watch for that. There'll be two parts to the midterm. You'll write both. You'll email those to me next week, and that'll be it. So watch for that email. If you have any issues with the course, or if you want to talk to me, I'm in here. You can see I'm in the office for every video. I'm in the office all the time. So all you have to do is call me, or better yet, email, and we will set up an appointment. I would love to meet with you and help you with anything. If you start working on this midterm and you're unclear about what to do next, email, talk to me. I'll meet you. We can meet for coffee at Starbucks. We can meet in the office here. Whatever you need, I want you to get a lot out of this course, and I hope that you are, now that we're 3 or 4 weeks into it. So do not sit with your frustration. Do something about it. Come talk to me if you're frustrated with anything, or if you don't understand the readings, or whatever it is. Please come talk to me, and I will try to help with that. And so with that, I say, enjoy the American Revolution. Enjoy reading about King George, this royal brute, and enjoy Common Sense as much as one can enjoy Common Sense. It's a difficult book, but I think the way we're going to pare down the reading will make it manageable, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So I bid you a happy and wonderful week, and I will talk to you soon.